my life fell apart. And just like that, I was starting over, heartbroken, and no idea what my life and tomorrow was going to look like. But my friend, that was not the end of my story, thank God. Because 7 years ago, I started rebuilding slowly, piece by piece. And today, the woman who lost everything has everything she once prayed for. The woman who wasn't chosen is chosen every single day. The woman who was drowning in debt is free, and the woman who had no idea what my life and what her tomorrow looked like is talking to you right now, walking in her purpose. So, how do you go from there to here? That is what today's episode is all about, my friend. Not just theory, not a nice motivational speech, the actual things I did to rebuild my life so you can borrow a leaf and start rebuilding yours. Hello there, my friend. Welcome back to this episode. My name is Lydia and I am your host. It is so good to have you here again. Now, last week I shared my story. I told you why I started rebuilding and I gave you the 5 reasons I didn't quit. Today, I want to show you how I rebuilt my life, the actual ways, my ways. So if this is your first time here, welcome. I am so grateful you're here. Please hit that like and subscribe button because this rebuilding series is one you do not want to miss a single episode of. And if you've been rocking with me from day one, welcome home, my friends. Welcome back home. Now, before I give you my ways, I need to put a disclaimer. There are many ways to build a life, to rebuild a life, many, many ways. What I'm about to share with you is not a formula. It is not the 10 commandments of rebuilding. It is simply my way, what I did and what worked for me. Well, would every single one of these work for you exactly the way they worked for me? Maybe, maybe not. Your story is different. Your journey is different. Your season is different. Your life is different. Your environment is different. But maybe, just maybe, you can borrow a leaf, take what serves you, adapt it to your own journey, and leave the rest. Leave what doesn't serve you. Okay, don't feel pressured. This is my way. Do we have a deal? Do we have a deal? All right, now let's get into the first thing I did when I was starting to rebuild my life. The very first thing I did was renew my relationship with God. Let me be honest with you, my friend. Let me get really vulnerable here. Before my life fell apart, I would have called myself a Christian. I went to church. I knew the songs. I prayed. But honestly, God was not at the center of my life. He was somewhere around the edges, someone I acknowledged. I knew he existed, but it was not someone I truly depended on. And then everything falls apart. And when the things I'd been leaning on disappeared now, I discovered, girl, I need God more than I needed answers, more than I needed another relationship, more than I needed money, more than I needed a plan. I needed God. I know I shared this in last week's episode, but my rebuilding really began on a porch or on a veranda. That is where I had my come to Jesus moment. I remember making a covenant with God, saying, Lord, if you get me through this, I'm going to spend the rest of my life and everything within me is going to serve you. Now, would I recommend that everyone makes a covenant with God the way I did? Maybe yes, maybe no. Was I putting God in a box a little bit? Perhaps I was. But that was where I was in that moment. I was so desperate. It was a very honest plea, and I'm so grateful that God met me there. I kept my side of the covenant as best as I could. I still do. Not perfectly, because I've certainly made mistakes along the way. We all do. But I've tried day after day to live a life that honors God. And when I look back over these past several years, I can honestly say, without a shadow of doubt, that God has been faithful to his side of the covenant too. But here's what really surprised me in that journey. Renewing my relationship with God wasn't just about me praying more, reading my Bible more, going to church more. Before I could grow closer to God, I had to start healing my understanding of who he was. You see, the God I grew up believing in was a God I was afraid of, not the healthy kind of reverent fear for God. I mean fear. I was so afraid of God judging me, waiting for me to fall. Is a God that I thought it was so impossible to please and a God that kept scores. My friend, you cannot run towards someone you are terrified of. And so part of my rebuilding was me allowing God to change my picture of him. Over time, I met a different God than the God I had grown up knowing. I met the God who sat with me on that porch, the God who stayed when everyone else left, the Father of the fatherless, the Father who wasn't waiting to condemn me, but to comfort me, the God whose grace was sufficient, was greater than my shame, the God that never used my shame to motivate me. Because once I stopped relating to God through fear, I could finally begin relating to God through love. And here's why I'm sharing this with you. Maybe your wall isn't that you don't believe in God. Maybe your wall is that you've ever only known God through disappointment, through the eyes of religion, through church hurt, through shame, through people who have misrepresented the character of who God is. If that is your story, I want you to know something. People may have gotten God wrong, but that does not mean that is who God is. For me, rebuilding began the day I stopped running from God and started running toward Him. Everything else fell in place after that. I started knowing God for myself, not the God I had been taught. Okay? Maybe that is what we also need to do. All right? My second thing I did is I stopped pretending everything was okay. I don't know about you, but have you ever noticed how easy it is to stay busy instead of being honest? I had become really good at surviving. I was working, taking care of my boys. I was paying my bills. I was smiling. And whenever people asked how I was doing, I was good. From the outside, it looked like I was really functioning, really thriving. But inside, my life was in pieces. It was falling apart every single day. And one day I realized that I cannot rebuild a life I am still pretending does not need rebuilding. I could no longer continue pretending. So I did something I'd never really done before. I sat down with myself, looked myself in the mirror, not to make another vision board or goals or plan for the next 5 years. I sat down to tell myself the truth. What was actually going on? What was actually broken? Where was I struggling? What keeps happening over and over again? What was I avoiding? I had to get honest with myself. Otherwise, nothing else was going to change. There's this story in the Bible about Nehemiah rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem. Before the guy could rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, he did not start laying bricks. He had to go inspect the damage. He had to go walk around the city and look at every broken wall, every gate that was burning, every pile of rubble, dirt, and everything he needed to know. And once he had understood that, only then did he begin rebuilding. My friend, that is exactly what you and I need to do with our own lives. Before you can rebuild, you have to do a life audit. Divide your life into areas that matter the most to you. For me, it was my relationship with God, my emotional health, my finances, my relationship with my children, my purpose, my career, my physical health, all those things. Then I gave each one a score from 1 to 5. I was really honest, not the score that I wanted people to see that, oh, my life is at a 5. Some of those areas, actually, most of those areas scored below a 3. And that was my honest state. My answers revealed my patterns, and my patterns revealed what needed rebuilding. Once I did that simple exercise of auditing my life, the things I had spent years calling bad luck or saying that is just who I am, I found out they were actually patterns. They were actually bad decisions made over time. So if you're in a rebuilding season, I don't want you to jump this phase and just start rebuilding. I want you to look at your life honestly. Do an audit. Look at the key areas of your life. Find clarity on what is going on. Find clarity on what's happening. Look at what is hurting. Look at what keeps repeating. Look at what you've been avoiding, you've been excusing, or you're covering up. Look at the areas of your life that feel very heavy, neglected, or out of alignment. Not so you can shame yourself, because we have a habit of shaming ourselves once we see the reality, but so that you can finally understand what needs your attention, because you cannot repair what you do not know. You cannot strengthen what you do not examine. And you cannot just rebuild if you're guessing. You have to really, really know what needs rebuilding. You have to inspect the areas of your life. So before the new habits, before the big decisions, before the fresh start, there has to be an honest moment where you say, hey, this is where I am. This is what is broken. This is where I need to begin. You cannot move to the next season without looking at what is going on currently. Do not rush to fix everything at once. I know the temptation is to look at your life, see everything that feels broken, and immediately start trying to change all of it. Don't do that. Get clear on what needs rebuilding. Look at where you are, what's going on, and then start with one thing at a time. And before you know it, you'll have gotten through your whole list. You have a plan and things that are aligning. Okay? My third way, or the third thing I did, was something that completely changed the trajectory of my life. I changed my environment, you guys. Now, for me, that meant relocating completely. I left my home country in Kenya and eventually started a brand new chapter here in the United States. But before you hear that and think, well, Lydia, I can't just move to another country. I'm not asking you to, because this work is much bigger than just geography, locations. When I did my life audit, I realized that I wasn't just living in unhealthy patterns, I was living in an environment that kept reinforcing those patterns. The same places, the same routines, the same expectations, the same environment, the same conversations, the same version of me. Sometimes we become so familiar with our surroundings that we don't even realize how much they're shaping us. And for me, my environment was clearly shaping who I was. So when the opportunity came for me to relocate, I took it. Not because I thought America would fix my life, not because I believed a new country would magically make everything disappear or better, but because deep down I knew I needed more than a fresh start. I needed a different environment where I could grow, where I could think, where I could be honest, where I could actually breathe. And moving did not solve everything. In fact, some of the cycles boarded that plane with me because you can change your address all you want without changing your heart. You can move across the world and still carry the same fears, the same patterns, the same wounds, the same beliefs, the same habits. The thing is, the inside work still has to happen. But changing my environment gave me something I desperately needed. It gave me space. It gave me space to think differently, space to build new habits, space to discover who I was without the things I was familiar with, space to interrupt patterns that had become normal simply because I had lived with them for so long. My friend, I want you to listen to me. Your environment is shaping you every single day. The people around you, the conversations you're having, the content you're consuming, the places you're spending your time, the culture you're immersed in, they are all influencing who you're becoming, whether you like it or not, whether you realize it or not. Now, your rebuilding may not require a passport per se, like mine did. Maybe for you, it's leaving your job. Maybe for you, it's moving to a different city. Maybe it's finding a healthier church community. Maybe it's creating some distance from people who constantly pull you backwards. Maybe it's changing what you watch, what you listen to, or even creating a peaceful corner in your home where you can actually be yourself. It can be as simple as that, or maybe it's reading something different. I just want you to ask yourself, is your environment feeding your healing, or is it feeding your cycles and patterns? Because sometimes the next step or best step in rebuilding is not changing who you are. It is changing the environment that is making it so hard for you to become who God is calling you to be. So changing your environment is very key when you're rebuilding. The fourth thing I did was probably one of the hardest things for me to do. I took a long, honest look at the people in my life. Now, let me say this carefully because I don't want you to misunderstand me. I don't want to be taken out of context. This wasn't about deciding who was good or who was bad. It wasn't about walking around cutting people off because they disagreed with me or because they were not perfect or because I thought I was now better than them. It was about me asking a different question. Is this relationship helping me to heal, or is it helping me stay the same? When you're rebuilding your life, not everyone around you is rebuilding with you. I want you to know that. Some people love the version of you that needs them. Some people are comfortable with the version of you that has no boundaries. Some people are comfortable with who you are in the moment. Some people benefit from you actually staying small, staying the same, staying available, staying insecure, staying dependent on them. Not because they're evil, no. Sometimes it's simply because that's the version of you they've always known. They're used to you that way. And when you begin changing, it makes them very uncomfortable, and that can change your relationship too. So as I looked honestly at my friendships and relationships, I realized that some of them were keeping my old cycles alive. Some conversations always pulled me back into victimhood, feeling sorry for myself. Some relationships normalized unhealthy behaviors I was trying to leave behind. Some friendships were built on actually trauma instead of purpose. Some of us were just trauma bonded. And there was one relationship in particular that was incredibly destructive to my emotional well-being. So I made some difficult choices and decisions. Some relationships had to go. They just had to end. Some became more distant. Some simply changed over time because I also changed, and I grieved them. You will grieve them. Just because a relationship needs to end doesn't mean it wasn't meaningful. You can love someone deeply and still recognize that they are no longer healthy for you and for where God is taking you next. And I think one of the biggest surprises for me that season was learning to enjoy solitude. If you know me, I don't like solitude. I am very extroverted. I need people around me. I need noise, conversations, activity. But solitude in that season became one of God's greatest gifts to me. Because in that silence, I finally had my own thoughts. I got comfortable with being alone. And even more importantly, I had God's voice more clearly than I ever heard before. Now, my friend, I am not telling you to go home today and start deleting people from your phone. Start cutting off people. Start telling people, I don't need you anymore. That's not the point. The point is to audit your relationships the same way you audited your life. Ask yourself, who here is helping me become the person God is calling me to be? And who keeps pulling me back into the person I'm trying to leave behind? You know the truth. You know some of those relationships are very toxic, but you're still there. The question is it taking you towards your rebuilding or is it taking you away from it? If it's taking you away from it, you know what to do. It's time to drop that relationship. All right. The fifth thing I did was something that didn't really come to me naturally at all. I am not a person that asks for help, but in my rebuilding journey, I finally came to the realization that I cannot do this on my own. And if you're like me, this might be one of the hardest things you'll ever do. I was the strong one. I was the dependable one, the firstborn daughter, the one who has to figure everything out, the one people came to when they needed help. So asking for help myself, it felt like I was admitting that, hey, I have failed. And for a long time, I believed that if I just prayed harder, worked harder, and stayed strong a little bit longer, I would eventually figure everything out on my own. But boy, was I wrong. I was not making any progress. I kept running into the same walls. And that is when I made the decision that actually changed my life. I asked for help. So I hired a coach, actually not one, three coaches. Each one of them had their own function and different area of my life that they were helping me with. One challenged my thought process. Another helped me heal and believe in myself and love again. And another one helped me rebuild my career. Did they rebuild my life for me? Absolutely not. I still had to do the work. I still had to make the decisions. I still had to show up every single day. But what they did is give me something I could not give myself. Perspective. Listen, my friend. Sometimes the greatest gift another person gives you is not even advice. It is the ability to see what you can no longer see because you've been living in survival mode for so long. Maybe your person is not a coach like myself. And maybe your person or the person you need to call for help is not a coach like I did. Maybe you need a therapist. Maybe it's a counselor. Maybe it's your pastor. Maybe it's a mentor. Maybe it's a trusted friend who's willing to tell you the truth in love. The point isn't who they are. The point is that rebuilding your life does not need to be a solo journey. In fact, it was never meant to be a solo journey. And one of the biggest lies we've believed is that asking for help is a sign of weakness. The opposite is true. It takes far more courage to say, I don't know what to do here, than it does to keep pretending you have it all together. God has always worked through people. Throughout scripture, it's evident. He sends people. He sent mentors, prophets, disciples, friends, and communities to walk alongside his people. Why then do we think it's different for me and you? So if you're rebuilding right now, let me encourage you to not let pride keep you stuck. The breakthrough you may be praying for may be on the other side of a conversation. It may be on the other side of asking for help. You don't have to carry this alone. You are not meant to carry this alone. Ask for help. Reach out. Reach out to somebody. Find a safe space where you can get help. But do not let pride stand in the way of you rebuilding just because you don't want to ask for help. The sixth thing I did was one I was avoiding for a very, very, very long time, my friend. It was very uncomfortable for me, but I finally faced my finances. Now, there was a season in my life when I was so afraid to log into my own bank account and see what was there. I didn't want to know even how much was left. I had good income, but I was living paycheck to paycheck. I was borrowing so much. I was in so much debt, constantly trying to stay one step ahead. From the outside, it probably looked like I was really managing and thriving. Behind the scenes, money was a constant source of stress for me. I had so much anxiety, shame around it. When I did my life audit, I realized that my financial problems were just not about numbers. They were connected to what was happening inside me. My beliefs about my worth, my fear of not having enough, my desire to please people, and some of the financial or the money habits I had developed over the years were me just making terrible choices. But now I decided to look at my debt, every loan, every balance, and it wasn't fun, but it was necessary because I had to start being honest with myself about where I was financially. Then I did something that really humbled me. I reached out to the people and organizations I owed money to. I explained my situation. I asked for grace. Some of them gave me grace, some of them did not. And I created repayment plans. It wasn't easy, but it needed to happen because now I wasn't running anymore. I was taking responsibility for rebuilding my financial life. I didn't get the shame it brought. I didn't care what people would say, but I got honest. I sold some things to take care of my debts. I sold my car, I think. I sold furniture in the house. I sold a lot of things just to let go so that I could repay my debt. I was so committed to paying off, doing better with my finances than I was committed in keeping up face. I needed to be honest from that point going forward about where I was. I needed to start stewarding what God had already entrusted to me much better than I was. But I also realized I needed to increase my capacity to earn, not just repaying. For me, rebuilding my finances wasn't just about reducing my expenses, it was also about increasing income. That is what eventually led me to change my careers, pursue new career opportunities, get myself into a good job, and later on build businesses alongside my corporate career. I stopped seeing money as something that simply happened to me, and I started seeing it as something I could steward. From repaying debts, from being honest, from budgeting better, spending wisely, and using money wisely, I started stewarding my finances better. And today, I don't see money the way I used to. Money is no longer my master. It's no longer something I fear. It's no longer an emergency. It's a resource. It's a responsibility. It's a tool that allows me to provide for my family, have other people, and build the life God has called me to build. But before then, I had to get honest with where I was financially. So if your finances feel like they're in the rubble right now, don't worry. Don't even stress about it. Well, it may stress you a little bit if you have debtors who are knocking at your door, but I want you to look at your numbers. Tell yourself the truth. Make a plan of how you're going to pay. Do not run away from your debtors. I encourage people to pay their debt. It is the wisest and the best way to steward what God has given you. Make a plan of paying those debts, but also get serious and do not shame yourself in the process. Then make better financial choices, because a lot of us were not taught how to handle money. A lot of us were not taught how to steward our finances better. And so when we got money, like me, I got money very early on. I started earning early on in my life. We just didn't know what to do with it. So we made very poor financial choices. Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for those choices and now learn how to do better. Okay? The seventh and final way I rebuilt my life was rebuilding my days. I just started rebuilding those small habits in my day. I would wake up in the morning, choose to do something different than I did yesterday. You know, if you don't change habits every day, the habits compound over the years. There's a book, Atomic Habits, that I recommend you go read it. The habits you change, they compound every single day. Just small habits every day. Spend time changing your habits in a single day. Then slowly by slowly, your habits will change the next day. And the day after that, before you know it, the week is done because you did something different. The weeks turn into months, months turn into years, and years turn into your life. And so for me, I had to shift and do things differently. I would wake up in the morning, choose to be still, choose to say my grace, choose to have a devotion in the morning just to help myself get started and to command my day early in the morning. I chose gratitude over complaining every single day. So I will do a gratitude journaling challenge every day. Write things I'm grateful for, the ones I'm grateful that I have, the ones that I do not have, the ones that I'm anticipating. And I will tell myself the honest truth very early on in the morning. I had to stop making choices on the whim. I had to stop being reactive. Before I listened to the opinions of other people and the world's opinions, I spent time in God's word. I prayed, I downloaded, had to sit quietly with God before I faced the demands of my day. So those simple habits every day became the foundation that everything else was built on. I also had to rebuild my relationship with my body. My dear friend, my body had carried me through years of stress, grief, disappointment, and survival. It had absorbed so much of everything I had been through, and for a long time, I did not like my body. I treated it like an afterthought. So I decided to steward it differently. Get healthy, eat well, rest, nourish it with better food. Not because I was chasing a certain look, but because this body is the house I was rebuilding my life in. This body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. And I wanted to continue honoring the gift God had given me through taking care of my body. And rebuilding my relationship with my body also meant rebuilding my boundaries, rebuilding the choices I had made, and I had to stop making terrible choices that no longer aligned with who God was calling me to become. I stopped looking for comfort in places that left me emptier than before. I stopped giving parts of myself away just because I was lonely or longing to feel loved. I learned that healing sometimes means saying no to temporary comfort so you can say yes to lasting wholeness. That wasn't easy, but it was very necessary. Every boundary I set became another brick in the life I was rebuilding. And let me say this with a lot of love, because I think a lot of us are tempted by this in one way or another. When your pain gets louder, when you're in so much pain, you are tempted to reach for something to numb you. Maybe it's alcohol. Maybe it's endless scrolling. Maybe it's staying busy. Maybe it is sexual addiction. Maybe it is pornography. Maybe it is going back to a relationship that you know you don't need to be there. Maybe it is dating the wrong people. That is not healing. That is anesthesia. And the anesthesia always wears off. But healing is you staying present long enough for you to feel the pain and still do the work. I also became very intentional about what I allowed into my mind. The conversations I entertained at that point, the voices I listened to, the people and whose advice I took, the media I consumed, everything that I watched. Because when you're rebuilding, you're very vulnerable. And if you cannot build a wall around your mind and what it is you're consuming, then there was going to be a problem because I was not guarding my mind. And because of the state I was in, I was prone to fall back into the old habits. You have to learn to guard your heart, guard your mind, and guard everything else that's within you when you are rebuilding. And my friend, when I look back now, I realize that none of these things on their own rebuilt my life. It wasn't about me moving. It wasn't about me hiring coaches. It wasn't the budgeting or getting good with money. It wasn't me setting boundaries. It wasn't me having a different routine, changing my routines and how I used to do different. It was all of these things working together over time that helped me rebuild. You may make one change but neglect the other. What I'm trying to say is one thing will not move the needle. It's the combination of those small things and small habits you change that is going to help you rebuild. That is how rebuilding happens. Not overnight, not all at once, but slowly, one choice at a time, faithfully, and staying consistent. And before you know it, one day you look around and you realize you're no longer standing in the rubble. You are standing in the life you once prayed for. Okay, my friend? One more thing. My way is not the way. It is simply the way that God used to rebuild my life. As I said at the beginning, your journey won't look exactly like mine, and that's okay. But if there's something in my story that gives you hope, I want you to borrow it. If one of these 7 ways I've talked about is exactly what you need in this season, please start there. You don't have to rebuild everything today. Just lay the next brick. Just take the next step. And if you're looking for women who are rebuilding too, I'd love to invite you to join us inside the She Rebuilds Academy. It's a community of women like yourself who are choosing to heal over hiding, who are choosing growth over living in survival mode, and who are choosing to rebuild their life. We walk this journey together, one step at a time, one conversation at a time, one brick at a time. You'll find the link in the show notes. But before I let you go, I want to leave you with one of my favorite promises from Scripture. Philippians 1:6. Being confident in this very same thing, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. You know what that means? You did not start this rebuilding journey. God did. He's the one who started in your heart to rebuild your life. He's the one who refuses to leave you where he found you. And right here is the promise. God is going to bring it to completion. He finishes what he starts. Your responsibility is not to have the whole blueprint figured out. No. Your responsibility, my friend, is simply to keep laying the next brick, keep taking the next step. And God's responsibility is to finish what he started. So thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If this episode encouraged you, would you do me a favor? Please share it with someone who's rebuilding. Leave a review, subscribe wherever you're listening, and come tell me in the comments which of these 7 ways are you starting with fast. All right? Until next time, I want you to take care of yourself, be kind to yourself, and be kind to other people as well. Keep rising, keep rebuilding, and keep becoming the woman God created you to be. Take care. Bye bye.